Oops, I have the wrong background. Let me see. Sorry, that's so embarrassing. Well, now the secret's out. All right, I got to figure out how to do this. I teach adaptive yoga to the Little Red Door Cancer Agency, but I stream it from home. So this is the corporate virtual background I'm required to use. Let me pause here a moment. I know we're recording. I'll be back.
We haven't started. Oh, it is recording already. Good on you, Woody. You're very efficient tonight.
Yeah, set an alarm for 7, otherwise I forget.
Yeah.
There we
Welcome, Janet. Our surprise visitor.
I was going to say good morning, but actually it's good evening.
So we do have a quorum now, so that's something. I think I might have messed up. I put the agenda in the email, but it doesn't seem like the Zoom link there works. So I had to go back to the town site.
Oh, okay. I didn't use the link. I just typed in the meeting code and it worked.
Oh, good.
I did use the link successfully.
Oh, good evening, everyone, and in particular, good evening, Simona, and welcome to the Warrant Committee.
Thank you.
Welcome, Steve.
Hey, Cam.
Where Simona, we're also this is sort of one of the last meetings for FY25. We probably have one more before July 15th, which will be transfers coming from the Board of Selectmen meeting tonight. But we thought we should get rid of these ones first. So that's the order of business. I had hoped that folk from the various departments making these reserve transfer requests would be here as well. Kathy LaPlante assured me that they would be. So we might give them a couple of minutes. In the meantime, is there any other business we should raise? I suppose I should open the meeting for a start, but so let's open the meeting. I'll do a roll call of those present. Woody Wise.
Present.
Peter Smith.
Here.
Marty Howard.
Here.
Sarah Cadena Kinney.
Here.
Janet McCormick.
Here.
Steve Migalski.
Here.
And Melissa Herman.
Here.
And I welcome Simona Azevedo for her first meeting at the Warrant Committee. She's not formally entitled to vote until July 15th, but she's been sworn in, and I have asked Simona to be an active participant this evening. So don't be surprised if Simona raises her hands. So I'm also present, so I declare the meeting open. And maybe we can do minutes as the first order of business. Are there any concerns about the minutes that Peter distributed today? Oh, yes, this morning. Hearing none, I'll put them to the vote. I'll propose. How do I say this? Propose a motion to accept the minutes of the meeting of our last meeting. Peter, you want to say something? You're on mute.
Yes, now that I'm unmuted, I was going to second your motion.
Oh, thank you. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So it's unanimous. Let's move on. Woody and I had a meeting today with Dan Sichel, who is the head of the Sherborne Advisory Committee, which is the equivalent of the Warrant Committee in Sherborne. And we were discussing some recent developments in funding at the regional schools. And I would like to ask Woody to give us a summary of that discussion and bring you up to speed on where we're at there. You're on YouTube too, Woody.
Sorry. So I guess as background, it's worth noting that there's been some pressure from the Sherburne Finance Committee on the Regional School Committee to reduce the amount of E&D they have.
You might explain the E&D.
Yeah,
Excess and deficiency, I think it is, isn't it?
excess and deficiency. So basically, it's their cash balance at the end of the fiscal year, and I think it's statutory that they're required to keep it less than 5% of their budget. But they have run at 5%, which the Sherburne Finance Committee has felt is more than they've needed. They've used their E&D, the school committees use the E&D as essentially as a reserve fund to pay for things that come up, unexpected things that come up. And there's been a sense that they need more money than, there's a sense of the school committee has been that they need more money than the Sherburne Finance Committee has thought, due to some unexpected expenses they've had in the past. Things got somewhat, I think it's fair to say, somewhat tense between the Sherburne Finance Committee and the Regional School Committee this May, just after our town meeting, when at a school committee they went through their budget, addressing some capital expenses that they had upcoming, that had some of which had been previously, or most of which had been previously identified and funded. The most important one is replacement of rooftop HVAC equipment that was approved, I think 2 years ago, with the IMA was for 1.2 million, so Dover had about 600,000 of that, and the project got delayed for a variety of reasons. There was, I think the approval went through too late to get the work scheduled during the summer when it needs to be done, so that it doesn't disrupt the school year. There was some problems acquiring equipment, and both Sherburne and Dover capital budget committees put a lot of pressure on the school committee to consider electrification as a major goal of the project. If we're going to upgrade the HVAC system, it was felt that it should be done in the greenest way possible. When they went through this, I think they anticipated some increase in the amount of money they were going to need to spend. They didn't anticipate, though, that when they went back this spring and got their quotes, the lowest quote was for $2.1 million. The original estimate had been for 1.2. So they proposed to cover the money, the expense, the difference between the 1.2 and the 2.1 with a variety of funds, one of which was several years ago, we also had approved replacement of the boilers in the school for a cost of about $300,000. It turned out that as they went through things and had an engineering review, the boilers were thought to have another 10 years of useful life. So the $300,000 was not expended. And the school committee proposed that they use some of that money to help cover the gap in the rooftop HVAC deficit. They also had around I think $600,000, Cam, in money in their Indian account that they proposed to use to cover the rest of the difference. So between the 300,000 from the boiler project and the 600,000+ that was in E&D, the E&D,
I think it was 800 actually.
800.
Woody. Mhm.
They thought they could cover the difference and do the project, the rooftop project. The Sherburne Finance Committee was aware of the discussion at the school committee, and a number of members on the Finance Committee got upset, thinking that it was inappropriate for the school committee to be rebudgeting in this way without alerting the towns, and without some more possibly more approval by the either a town meeting or by at least by the Finance Committee and the Warrant Committee. And that's where things stand now. Dan Sickle, who's chair of the Finance Committee in Sherburne, has met with Dawn and had a discussion about this. I would actually recommend that for anyone interested, it's worthwhile listening to the YouTube recording of the school committee meeting, because it does. There is a discussion in which I would say if the school committee gives some pushback about their autonomy around and their need to be in control of their finances in a way that might make that makes the Finance Committee in Sherburne uncomfortable. I think might make some members of this committee uncomfortable. So that's where things stand. Dan has done a preliminary draft of a letter that he would like to see come from the Warrant Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Capital Budget Committees from Dover and Sherburne to the Regional School Committee to address some of the concerns that have come up around transparency and kind of control, financial control.
Yes, I think that's, I might add just a little there for color. I think Dan's point was, okay, so they had money in this E&D account to allocate to it. That's good. It didn't have an impact on our town budgets, but nobody chose to notify us that this was happening. And that seemed to be at least a breach of sort of building trust between the regional school committees and the respective Warrant and Finance Committee advisory committees. And I think that's a reasonable point. I think it when you're making adjustments to your budget with such a large amount, it would be at least appropriate to inform both towns of what was happening. And it was really sort of via accident that we really became aware of this. And I, for one, find that a little bit concerning. Um,
Is
And then the
there
other
rules
point-
around, are there rule, I mean, the E&D to me seems like it's a reserve fund, for lack of a better word. So I
Yes.
guess maybe I can understand why they tap that, but if they're tapping money that was approved for a separate project, I mean, do they actually have the discretion to do that? To take money from a boiler project and just apply it to another, I mean, could they take money that's, toward teachers and just do it as well, or toward books in the library? I mean, aren't there limitations in what they're allowed to do, let alone?
Dan says that they did pass it to their council, who said that the law in this area is somewhat vague, and one might interpret it in many different ways. One of which could be more strictly referring them back to the respective towns for at least a review. But another might give the regional school committee the independence to do that. So it's a sort of 6 of one and half a dozen of the other thing. Now, I do believe that traditionally, Dover at least has sort of respected the independence of the schools to make the financial decisions they need to make. But I still think there's a case to be made, both from a capital budget planning. The budget of the schools is over 50% of our budget. And I think it's reasonable for us to expect some insight when significant changes like that are taking place. And so I'm sort of comfortable with writing, or at least supporting a letter that says that. Now, the other aspect of it is the capital budget planning. So we really, when they use funds from the EOD, we've got no insight into what capital expenditures have been paid for in those activities. And so it becomes very difficult to us to plan forward to get a good feel for what our commitments might have to be towards the school, say, over the next 5 or so years. And Dan's point there was that it's probably appropriate for the school committee to at least commit to listing their planned capital budgets in a 5-year window, and making sure that at least the capital budget committees of the 2 towns are aware of that. And I think that's a reasonable proposition as well.
One of the points that Dan made is that Sherburne at least might have considered financing the difference in the capital expense between the 1.2 and 2.1, but we didn't have that option because no one was aware of what happened.
And the other thing was the concern that the school committee knew this before our respective town meetings, and if they had informed us earlier, we may well have been able to incorporate that into the budget planning for both towns. So I think that was a little bit of a deal that fell through the cracks in terms of appropriate process. Now, Dan also wanted to go one step further and try and ask them to really list out all of their E&D expenditures, and to be required to inform us of any such developments in the course of a year. I'm not so sure about that, and in fact, the lawyers weren't particularly sure about that either. So that's something that would need to be discussed further, I think. But that's at least where we stand at the moment, and probably we'll take a further discussion of that during the course of the next couple of months, I suppose. Marty.
Yeah, Cam, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think it does make sense that if they come back with some additional information or something like that, should go through another review. But the question I have on the 1.2 to the $2.1 million, was there any, I mean, that's over a 2-year period. The project went up by $900,000 on a base of 1.2 million. What caused that? And was there any kind of review with the contractor or rebid?
Well,
that seems awfully.
Well, We had part of that discussion. Actually, Barry Goldman, who's the chair of the Capital Budget Committee, joined us in this discussion today with Dan. And Dan said that from his insight, and I must admit I haven't listened to the Regional School Committee meeting yet. So I'm sure there were further discussions in that video of the causes. But evidently, when the initial budget was cut, it was planning to go with gas fueled air systems, and we in the Capital Budget Committee and in the Warrant Committee had both asked them to consider using electricity instead, just in the interest of going to more renewable solutions. And Dan thought that was a component of the price increase. And the other part of it was, of course, with the COVID inflation, lots of costs have gone up. But I think the other part, this was something that exercised Barry somewhat, is that we have difficulty in having more detailed discussions with the school on what are their options, and you can't sort of get a reduction in price of capital expenditures if you really have got no insight into the details of the project, who's been spoken to, and what sorts of discussions have happened. And Barry used as an example how we have reduced the costs of an HVAC replacement in our town library substantially by negotiating with multiple vendors on the subject, and Barry was intimately involved in those discussions, as was the town as well, and that we've managed to get the price reduced by over a couple of $100,000 by just doing that. Whereas initially the first proposal that came out of the library was for a substantial amount just for engineering services, and these engineering services in the end disappeared because we had direct negotiations with each of the engineering groups that were interested in bidding, and we managed to get all the information we needed without having quote unquote consulting services. Now we can't do that with the schools, and it might be to the benefit of the schools if people with good engineering negotiating experience are able to participate in those projects in a way to make it cheaper for the town and for the schools.
Yeah.
So that's another open issue, Martin.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would imagine Dawn, from the interactions I've had, she seems to be a pretty effective negotiator that would, I would be surprised if she wasn't down in the details of the contractor and the cost, those sorts of things.
I think at a financial level, probably, but not from the engineering perspective, looking at the engineering alternatives. And one of the things that is particularly challenging with projects involving renewables is most of the traditional vendors are very comfortable with fuel-based systems, fossil fuel-based systems. They've used them for years. They know how they function. They know how to maintain them. They know everything else about them. They're a lot more skeptical about things like using solar or wind energy and electricity to do these things. And so I think that also accounts for part of the challenges that we're all having on that front at the moment. I mean, even personally, we have those challenges. You'll go to a vendor to replace your furnace and say we want to do it with heat pumps, and you'll often hear very skeptical references to it, to heat pumps and recommendations to stay with what you know. And it's the same when people go to buy electric cars, to go into an auto dealer, and they'll be steering you towards the traditional cars much more frequently. So these are issues that we need to address, both personally at a town level and I think at the school level. anyway, that's where we stand at the moment. I just thought it was important that everybody be informed. Are there any other questions on this issue right now? Sarah?
Unmute here. Given that it seems we discovered this information quite sort of accidentally, I'm just curious, do we know, or is it possible to ascertain with greater specificity how frequently the advisory committee uses this reserve fund for these unexpected
It's
expenses?
not the advisory committee, it's the
Sorry.
school regional services, the
Right.
regional school committee. And it's the regional school committee that approves those things. So
So
it's a little bit,
it's per their guidelines or limitations that are intended to be in place for this to have.
right. And I guess we've got a little bit of egg in our face, not participating in that and understanding what was happening. So there's that as well. One has to be honest on that front. We
Right.
could have been attending that meeting.
At the same school committee meeting, May 7th, they were voting on using $45,000 to repair the fire detection system that had somehow been causing problems. They also were using something like $30,000 to address some problems with their ductwork on the exterior of the building. You get the sense that they use this quite a bit. And I think with the transfer of this, the 800,000 to the HVAC project, to the rooftop project, they will get down below 5% of their budget in their E&D account, which is what Sherburne has been kind of encouraging them to do, targeting more 3 to 4% rather than 5%. There was a lot of pushback at the school committee meeting, though, about that as a goal. I think they like having a 5% account. Apparently more for security than because they actually ever expend that much.
Yes, but it is sort of interesting that they've got $800,000 under the carpet to finance something like that, that overrun, without actually informing the town of that directly.
This is a done deal though, so the point of any letter is more to set expectations going forward as opposed to
Exactly. Yes, we're not going to sort of be dredging them or dragging them over the carpet for that, but we would like to get closer cooperation on some of these issues.
So that said, what steps can we suggest or propose to improve these future budget sort of transparencies and the communication between the committees and the town?
Right, it's a good question. I think that's probably what we're going to have to discuss in the next steps. And Dan Sickle has proposed preparing a draft that he will give to us, and we can then review it and add our thoughts to it as well. And we've certainly got the choice to say we don't agree with what Sherburne is proposing. Or we could say, yes, we want to join the comments. So that's something for a future meeting. So that's at least one thing. I think probably the other lesson to be drawn is that we really do need to focus more on the liaison with the school committees, and that we become sort of active participants there, and really. I know when I was a liaison, I very much got the feeling that I wasn't expected to say anything and I should shut up and just let things happen. I think that's the sort of we're protecting our turf mentality that's got us into this situation.
Pam, I have to respectfully agree with you. I was liaison and I attended several meetings in person, a couple via Zoom, and I was very publicly admonished by a certain member of the committee for having asked a question in that I wasn't allowed. And it was the delivery really that I agree with your sentiments in that it very much did it in a tone that made me feel like I had no place being there, and how dare I disrupt the
Right.
meeting by asking a question that I didn't realize I was powerless to do. So
Right.
glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think historically they're very open to meet offline, like in between the meetings and go through the details. But in the meeting, there's a very tight agenda. And if we don't know about it before the meeting, it is quite hard to influence or interject.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally agree, Sarah.
Mhm.
I do think that the issue primarily revolves around capital expenses. I don't think anyone's going to argue about the way or feel like we have all that much input into whether they use their E&D account to buy more textbooks. But capital expenses are complicated and kind of require a technical review in addition to just the financial review. So it does seem that that lends itself to more input from the capital budget committee in both towns. And that's a way in which the towns can be more aware and involved in what's happening, it seems.
Particularly as it could have longer term financial consequences for the town. And I think that's really one of the reasons why we need to keep an overview of that, because as we know, our capital budget expenses are exploding over the next few years.
This is just my own personal kind of read on the way the meeting went, but my read on the discussion at the school committee was that they don't see a particular need for input from the town around these issues, that they feel that their India account is their account, it's their money. And I don't think
but it's sourced from the towns, unfortunately.
Right, and the amount of money in the India account, as has been pointed out to them, does have repercussions through the rest of the budget. So while there are important reasons that the school committee has a lot of statutory control over their budget and on how money gets spent, we have a lot of interest. The school committee, their schools are 60% of Sherburne's budget. I think 55% this year of our budget. So it's a lot of money.
Yeah. Any other questions? Suggestions? Then let's table that for now, and we'll make sure that we reintroduce this subject when Dan comes back to us with a proposal, and we can then have a discussion about how we want to proceed.
One quick question. Woody, you mentioned the date of the meeting, so we can look it up and review it. Is May 7th?
May 7th, yeah. I can send around the link if you want.
I would love that. Thank you
That
so
would
much.
be helpful. Mm-hmm. Yep. Any thoughts, Simona?
No, I have to catch up with too many things.
I understand. But I wanted to explicitly give you the opportunity to
Thank you.
say
Appreciate it.
something if you were hanging back.
I would,
Okay.
I don't think it was mentioned, but just for Simone's benefit, E&D stands for excess and deficiencies.
And deficiencies, yeah.
Thank you. Kim, just a quick question on the Sherburne's Finance Committee. Is that equivalent of Warrant Committee for Dover?
Yes, yes.
What about
the
capital budget?
In the municipal parlance, some towns call their committee an advisory committee, and others call it a warrant committee. But they're essentially got the same mandate. So it's just a little bit of word salad that we have to jump through.
And do they have an equivalent of our capital budget committee?
They do, yes, as well. I mean, most towns are structured in a very similar way because all the rules and regulations require that. And I would just say for the simplicity that the warrant committees of the state have a strange function because we're not really part of the management structure of the town. We're a sort of an independent review authority. And so as such, I mean, I think it's not unreasonable for us to go directly to the schools and expect more interaction and heads up when changes happen without, and often those are beyond everybody's control. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying we need better communications. Okay, so let's just table that. And because nobody from fire and ambulance or the conservation commission have turned up, I'm just going to table those reserve fund transfers until we can find somebody to talk to. Is that reasonable from everybody's perspective? I don't feel comfortable with approving expenditures when I've got no real insight into why they're necessary.
I know part of the $12,000 that fire is asking for repairs, the so-called large squad truck, which is the large vehicle that we use for fighting brush fires. It's 40 years old. And it's getting pretty hard to find parts for it. And so the Bulldog Fire Services had to essentially fabricate some new parts, but that's not the whole 12,000. And I'm sorry I missed their last meeting, so I can't provide any further insight.
Yeah. No, and Kathy LaPlante assured me that representatives would be here. I feel a little bit vague on my face. Next time I will want to talk to know who they are and make sure that they are going to attend. So I apologize for that. And it probably means we may need to meet within sometime next week quickly to go through these because these funds can only be transferred within the financial year. But we will have bank transfers through to July 15th, so we may well be able to combine both of those. We would have had to have another meeting anyway, so we might just bring that one forward and have it next week. I hope that's not too inconvenient for everybody. Okay, well, thank you very much for attending. I guess I'm looking forward to a motion to adjourn. Do I hear one?
So moved.
Second.
Then I think let's vote through acclamation and we'll leave it at that.
Right.
Thank you everybody for coming and we'll talk again soon. Bye now.
Good night.
Thanks, Cam.